She was lost at sea. The billionaire saved her life and changed his forever. Part 4. Chapter 20, The Revelation. The silence in the hospital waiting area was unbearable. Claire sat curled in a chair, her arms wrapped tightly around her middle as though she could hold herself together by force. Her hair was coming loose from its clip, and the sleeves of her dress were damp from where she'd wiped her eyes again and again. The harsh white lights above buzzed faintly. Every footstep in the hallway made her flinch. Victor hadn't spoken since the nurse gently asked them to step out of the trauma room. Claire had kissed Luke's forehead. He hadn't woken. Now, she sat like a woman unraveled, afraid to speak, afraid not to. Across the room, Victor stood facing the wall-length window, his hands in the pockets of his dark coat, unmoving. He hadn't looked at her since they left Luke's side. Until now. He turned. His expression was unreadable, his voice, calm and low. "Start talking." Claire opened her mouth. Closed it. "I need the truth, Claire," he said. "All of it. Right now." Her voice broke on the first word. Is he mine?" She nodded slowly, her breath shaking. "Yes." Victor looked down, exhaling hard. When he raised his eyes again, they burned into her. "Since when?" "Since the Maldives." He clenched his jaw. Claire stood slowly, her legs uncertain beneath her. "I didn't know until after I got back to New York. I took a test 3 weeks later, and when I saw the result, You decided not to tell me," he said, his voice harder now. "You made that call. Alone." "I was scared, Victor." Her voice cracked. "You're not just some man. You're you. You're powerful and untouchable, and you live in a world where women lie about things like this. I didn't want to be seen as someone who was trying to trap you." "I would have never thought that," he snapped. "Never." "I didn't know," she whispered. "You had your life. I had mine. I had to protect him." Victor stepped forward. "By denying him his father." She flinched. "I've missed everything," he said, a tremor under his words. His first steps. His first words. 2 entire years. "I know." Her eyes were wet again. "You have no idea how many times I wanted to tell you. But the longer I waited, the harder it became. And then, he got sick. And I realized how wrong I'd been to keep it from you. But I didn't know how to undo it." Victor stared at her for a long, frozen moment. Then he simply said, "We're leaving." Claire blinked. "What?" "Luke needs the best care now. He needs diagnostics, monitoring, answers. I'm not standing here waiting 30 days for a delayed hospital panel. I'm taking you both to my clinic. Tonight." He was already pulling out his phone, giving clipped orders to his team, arranging a private transfer, notifying his doctors, organizing round-the-clock pediatric specialists. "Victor," she tried, but he held up a hand. "We'll talk later," he said, his voice steel. "Right now, I'm making sure my son doesn't die." The ride home was a blur. Claire sat in the back seat, her body numb. She couldn't tell if her stomach churned from guilt or fear, or both. Victor didn't speak. Not during the ride. Not even when they arrived at her apartment. He simply stepped out and held the door open for her like a man on a mission. She hesitated for half a second, then led him up the familiar staircase to the second floor. When they reached her door, Claire paused with her key in her hand. "You don't have to come in," she said softly. "I do," Victor replied, without hesitation. She opened the door. The apartment was quiet. Rosa, pale and shaken, stood up from the couch immediately. "He's stable. The ambulance just dropped him off. He's in his room." Claire nodded and touched her hand briefly. "Thank you, Rosa." Victor stepped inside slowly, his gaze sweeping over the small space, the carefully folded blankets, the framed photo of Claire holding Luke in Central Park, the toy train on the floor. He took it all in like evidence in a case. Then Claire led him down the hall, stopping at the nursery door. She pushed it open gently. Victor stepped in and froze. Luke lay curled beneath a soft navy blanket, a white bandage still taped to his inner elbow from the blood draw, a humidifier humming softly beside the crib. His cheeks were pale. His small chest rose and fell slowly. Victor stared. The grey eyes. The slightly unruly dark hair. The same mouth. The same brows. The same face. There was no need for words. This was his child. Claire turned to look at him, and saw everything change in his expression. The disbelief. The heartbreak. The awe. Victor moved toward the crib like a man seeing a miracle for the first time. He lowered himself into the rocking chair beside it. Sat perfectly still. And whispered, "I should have been here." Claire pressed a fist to her mouth. He looked up at her, something raw in his eyes. "Whatever comes next," he said quietly, "you don't get to decide it alone. Not anymore." Claire nodded through tears. "Okay." Victor looked back at Luke. And for the first time since that night in the Maldives, they were no longer two people bound by a secret. They were three. A family, broken, but no longer hidden. Chapter 21, A Race Against Time. The world didn't slow down, it accelerated. By morning, Victor had moved mountains. Claire stood in stunned silence as a fleet of black SUVs arrived outside her Brooklyn apartment. Men in dark suits coordinated with seamless precision. A private pediatric medevac team had already been flown in. By the time the sun crested the skyline, Luke's hospital transfer was set in motion. They didn't go back to New York Presbyterian. Victor took them to Ambrose Medical Institute, a private facility on the Upper East Side funded through his own philanthropic foundation. Known only to a handful of patients and stocked with world-class physicians flown in from across the globe, it was the kind of place where no red tape existed and time was measured in heartbeats, not paperwork. Claire sat beside Luke in the custom-fitted ambulance, her hands never leaving his. Victor rode up front, speaking in clipped, precise sentences over the phone to doctors, labs, and senior staff. His voice never rose, but the urgency in it sent a clear message. This wasn't just any child. This was his son. And nothing would stand in his way. The clinic was a glass and stone haven hidden behind tall trees and guarded gates. No flashing lights. No waiting rooms. No journalists. Just quiet, calm, and power. Claire barely recognized the woman in the mirror of the private suite's bathroom as she washed her face. Pale, exhausted, eyes bloodshot from crying. Her fingers trembled as she dried her hands. Every inch of her screamed to stay strong, for Luke, but inside, she was unraveling. She returned to the room just as the lead pediatric hematologist, Dr. Estelle Varga, stepped in. A tall, composed woman in her late 40s with Scandinavian precision in her voice and no time for gentle vagueness. Victor stood immediately. Claire followed, her knees nearly buckling. Your son's blood work and marrow biopsy confirm the diagnosis, Dr. Varga said without hesitation. Luke has severe aplastic anemia. The air left Claire's lungs. She blinked, her voice cracking. What is that exactly? Dr. Varga turned a tablet screen toward them. Charts. Slides. Colored cells. It's a rare bone marrow failure disorder. His body isn't producing enough new blood cells, red, white, or platelets. That explains the bruising, the fatigue, the immune weakness. His marrow is functionally shutting down. Claire covered her mouth. Oh my God! How severe? Victor asked, steady but cold. Dr. Varga tapped the screen. His cell counts are dangerously low. He's neutropenic, extremely vulnerable to infection. He needs treatment immediately. What kind of treatment? Claire asked, gripping the edge of the chair. Supportive care will begin right away, antibiotics, transfusions. But ultimately, she looked at them both. He needs a bone marrow transplant. Claire gasped. But how do we find a donor? We start with family, Dr. Varga said. Biological parents are often the first tested. If we're lucky, one of you will be a match. I'll do it, Victor said without pause. Start the tests now. Dr. Varga nodded. We already took a sample when you arrived. We're running the HLA typing. We should have a result within a few hours. Claire looked at Victor. There were no words in her vocabulary deep enough for what she saw on his face. He wasn't just angry. Or afraid. He was grieving something in real time, the years he'd missed, the helplessness of watching his son suffer, and the knowledge that he couldn't buy time, not with all the money in the world. He stepped into the hallway with Dr. Varga for more details. Claire stayed behind, unable to leave Luke's side. He looked so small in the bed. Pale and sleeping, wires tangled around his chest, and four snaking into his arm. I'm so sorry, baby, she whispered. I'm so sorry. 3 hours later, Victor returned with a strange expression on his face. Claire stood immediately. Well, I'm a full match, he said. His voice cracked for the first time. Claire pressed a hand to her heart, blinking fast. You can be his donor. Yes, he said. I will be. She stepped forward. Victor. He reached for her hand, not with romance, not with heat, but with the grounding steadiness of a father who had just been handed a second chance. I'm going to save him, he said quietly. Whatever it takes. You're not doing this alone anymore. Claire couldn't speak. Because in that moment, she knew. Everything was about to change. And Victor Ambrose was no longer just a man from her past. He was the only hope their son had. Chapter 22, A Father's Gift. Victor stood in the center of the sterile white room, quietly buttoning the cuff of his shirt sleeve as a nurse prepared the foreline. There was a stillness in him, but it wasn't calm. It was the kind of stillness that came before a storm, a fierce internal quiet born from sheer focus, from the primal urgency of a man doing what must be done. The man who once commanded boardrooms and buyouts now stood bare-armed, stripped of power, stripped of pride, just a father, ready to give part of himself to save the child he had only just begun to know. Claire sat just outside the procedure room, hands clenched tightly in her lap. She watched through the glass, her breath shallow. She hadn't left Luke's side for more than 10 minutes since their arrival at Ambrose Medical, but Victor had told her, gently, firmly, to go get some tea, take a breath, then meet him here. He wanted her to see this. He needed her to see this. A nurse stepped in beside him now, checking the flow on the catheter. They had opted for peripheral blood stem cell donation, the least invasive form of marrow harvesting, though the procedure was far from simple. For days now, Victor had been receiving injections to stimulate his stem cell production, shots that left his bones aching and his energy thin. He hadn't complained once. Claire had offered to take his place, not knowing if she would match, not even caring, but Dr. Varga had calmly explained that Victor's profile was a perfect HLA match. It's rare, the doctor said. He's not just a compatible donor. He's the best possible one. A genetic miracle. So he had agreed. No hesitation. No demands. Just a single sentence, whatever he needs, he gets. Now, the machine hummed beside him, drawing blood from one arm, passing it through a complex filter to extract stem cells, and returning the remaining blood to the other. Victor sat still, only his eyes moving, fixed on the glass where Claire waited. She met his gaze, and her throat tightened. This man, once a stranger on a yacht, once a lover in paradise, now a father on a hospital bed, was giving more than she could ever have asked. And he did it not for her, not out of obligation or anger or guilt, but for Luke. For the child he hadn't even known existed a week ago. Tears slipped down her cheeks silently. She remembered the nights she'd watched Luke sleep, terrified by the thought that she might one day lose him. She remembered the first bruise, the first fever, the helpless wait for the test results. Through it all, she had carried the weight alone. But not anymore. Now, Victor carried it with her. And in this moment, bone deep, marrow deep, he was proving that he always would. The donation took hours. Claire never left the hallway. Nurses offered her coffee, food, a blanket. She refused everything. Finally, the lead transplant nurse opened the door. He did well, she said gently. The harvest was successful. We're prepping the cells now for infusion into your son. Mr. Ambrose is resting in the adjacent suite, if you'd like to see him. Claire rose on numb legs and stepped into the quiet room where Victor now lay, pale but alert, propped against crisp white pillows. An four hung beside him. He looked exhausted, drained, but there was a fire in his eyes that hadn't dimmed. She sat down beside him. Reached for his hand. He let her. Their fingers entwined without a word. For a moment, they just breathed. Then Claire whispered, "You saved him." Victor looked at her. "No," he said softly. "We did." She blinked through the burn in her throat. "I never wanted to keep him from you," she said. "But I was terrified. I thought you'd see me as someone using him. Using you. I don't care how long it took," he said. "I only care that I found him in time." She lowered her head, pressing her forehead to the back of his hand. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Victor tilted her chin gently with his free hand. "Don't say that," he murmured. "You gave him life. You raised him. You kept him safe. And now, we move forward. As a family. That's all that matters." Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but this time they weren't from guilt or fear. They were from something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Later that night, Claire sat beside Luke's bed as the transplant infusion began, a slow, careful process as Victor's donated stem cells entered their son's bloodstream, starting the work of rebuilding his immune system from the inside out. It would take time. There would be risks, side effects, more monitoring. but the doctors were optimistic. Very few children had a match as perfect as Luke did. Even fewer had parents willing to move heaven and earth to save them. Claire reached for Victor's hand as he stood beside her. Together, they watched the fluid drip into their son's arm. Together, they began again. Chapter 23, The Truth Unfolds. The quiet hum of hospital machines had become their new reality. Luke lay resting in his recovery suite, cocooned in soft blankets, a hint of color returning to his cheeks. The transplant had gone smoothly, better than any of the doctors dared hope. The next 48 hours would be critical, but for the first time in weeks, Claire felt a glimmer of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Relief. But relief didn't equal peace. And that night, as she stood by the large window in Luke's room, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, she felt Victor's presence behind her before she heard him speak. He closed the door gently, shutting out the noise of the nurses' station and hallway beyond. She didn't turn around. "I need the truth now," Victor said quietly. "All of it." Claire gripped the windowsill, her knuckles white. "I know." He moved closer, slowly, the way you approach something fragile. "You told me the what. Now I need the why." Claire turned to face him, eyes tired, soul heavier than it had ever been. She looked at the man she had once trusted enough to fall into without hesitation. And now he was here again, stronger, steadier, and hurting. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after I got back to New York," she began. "I took the test alone in my bathroom. I cried for hours. I knew immediately you were the father. There hadn't been anyone else." Victor's face didn't move. He was listening, so still, so intensely focused she could feel the weight of every breath he took. "I wanted to call you," she said. 100 times. I stared at your number. I even drafted emails, messages. But I couldn't send them." "Why?" he asked, low and rough. Claire stepped toward him, eyes pleading. "Because you're you, Victor. You're a billionaire. A global figure. You live in a world I don't belong in, with power I couldn't even wrap my head around at the time. You think I would have rejected my own child?" His voice was quiet but cut like glass. "No," she said quickly. "No, I didn't think that. I was afraid you'd want him, but for the wrong reasons. That you'd think I kept him to trap you. Or worse, that you'd see me as a liability. Just another woman who made a mistake on a yacht." Victor looked away, jaw tight. "You really thought so little of me?" "No," she whispered. "I thought too much of you. That's why it terrified me." He didn't speak. So she kept going. The words now poured out, raw, honest, years overdue. "I had just gotten back to work. I was exhausted and scared and alone. I wasn't ready to raise a child, but I knew I would. I knew the second I saw those 2 pink lines that I wasn't going to run. I couldn't run. But I also couldn't bring you into it, not without knowing what kind of life Luke would have with you. What kind of father you'd be." She choked, voice breaking. "I needed to see you again. In real life. Not on magazine covers. Not in my memories. And when I did, when we reconnected, I froze. I was so afraid of ruining it, of ruining everything, that I just kept hiding him. Kept lying." Victor's eyes finally lifted to hers. And what she saw in them broke her. He wasn't angry. Not in the way she'd feared. Not cold or vicious. He was devastated. "You should have told me," he said. Not for me. Not even for you. For him. I know. I missed everything. His first cry. His first steps. His first word. It was Mama, she whispered, voice trembling. Victor looked away again, shoulders tightening. I didn't get to hear it. Claire stepped closer. But you can still be there for everything else. He met her eyes again, and she saw it, the war raging inside him. The need to forgive battling the pain of betrayal. I can't take back the choice I made, she said softly. But I'll never make it again. If you want to be in his life, I'll never stand in your way. Silence stretched between them. The only sound was Luke's steady breathing over the baby monitor in the corner. Victor stepped forward at last. His voice was quieter now, rougher. He's my son. I already am in his life. I'm not going anywhere. Claire's breath hitched. I'm still angry, he added. I'm still hurt. But I see you now, all of you. And I see what you've done for him. You kept him safe. You gave him everything. She nodded slowly. I did my best. Victor reached up, brushed a tear from her cheek with the back of his finger. You did more than that, Claire. You gave me a reason I never knew I needed. The tears came faster now, silent and unrelenting. They didn't fall into each other's arms. There were no romantic declarations, no cinematic kisses. Not yet. But something broke open between them. Something real. Forgiveness. Understanding. A shared grief, and a shared hope. And in that moment, standing in a hospital room beside the son they had made together, the truth, painful, imperfect, finally set them free. Chapter 24, Love Reborn. The days that followed moved like the tide, slow, steady, and full of quiet miracles. Luke's recovery wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden awakening, no moment where he leapt out of bed smiling. But there were small signs, steady and sure, the kind of signs Claire had come to cherish like treasures. His fever broke. His color returned. He started eating again, just a little at first, warm broth, crackers, apple slices. And then one morning, while Victor sat beside him reading a picture book aloud, Luke reached out and grabbed his father's sleeve with tiny, determined fingers. Read it again, he murmured sleepily. Victor froze. Then his voice cracked as he replied, of course, little man. As many times as you want. Claire stood in the doorway and watched it unfold, this quiet blooming of a bond that should have taken years, but somehow began in days. There was a gentleness in Victor she hadn't expected. Not just protectiveness, not obligation, but love. Real, raw love. The kind that formed in silence, in late nights beside a hospital bed, in the soft way he brushed Luke's curls off his forehead. He didn't speak of the time he'd lost. He didn't wallow in guilt. He simply showed up, again and again. And Claire. She had stopped pretending she was fine. Stopped carrying the weight of it all on her own shoulders. For the first time in years, she had someone to lean on. Someone who saw her, not as a single mother or a past mistake, but as the woman she truly was, flawed, exhausted, brave, and still full of love. One evening, as the sun sank beyond the Manhattan skyline, Claire and Victor stood side by side on the small balcony just off Luke's suite. The city was quiet in that golden hour way, distant sirens, soft horns, the occasional gust of wind. Victor held 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to her without a word. They sipped in silence for a moment before Claire said softly, he asked about you yesterday. Victor turned his head, his jaw tightening just slightly. What did he say? Claire smiled faintly. He said, "Is the man with the books going to come back again tomorrow?" Victor looked away, blinking hard. Claire reached out and touched his hand. You don't have to make up for the past. You're already giving him the future. Victor looked down at their hands, then back at her. I want to give you something too. She held her breath. I don't want to just be Luke's father, he said. I want to be here, for both of you. Not just because of what happened. Not just because it's the right thing. But because I still love you. Claire's chest tightened. I never stopped, he said. Even when I tried to forget you, I couldn't. And now that I know the truth, now that I know him, I can't walk away. She stared at him, stunned by the openness in his voice, the unguarded honesty. I was so afraid, she whispered. That you'd hate me. That you'd look at me and only see betrayal. I did, he admitted gently. At first. But then I looked at Luke. And I saw something I couldn't ignore, a chance to begin again. Not from the same place, but from the truth. From love. From the life we left behind. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I still love you too, she said quietly. Even when I shouldn't have. Even when I thought I had no right to. He reached for her hand and drew her in slowly, carefully, no rush, no pressure. And when she stepped into his arms, it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like home. That night, they sat on either side of Luke's bed, reading aloud in soft turns as he drifted in and out of sleep. Victor held the book. Claire held their son's hand. And when Luke, still drowsy, looked up and mumbled, "Can we all go somewhere when I'm better? Somewhere sunny?" Claire glanced at Victor. His eyes were already on her. And he smiled. "Yes," he said. "Somewhere very sunny." Claire smiled back, the promise clear between them. A new chapter. A new life. This time, not just lovers. Not just parents. But a family, forged not by perfection, but by forgiveness and love reborn. Chapter 25, Wedding in the Waves. It was the kind of day that felt painted by memory. The Maldives lay out before them like a dream, the turquoise waters calm and endless, the soft curve of white sand warm beneath bare feet, and the horizon a glowing band of molten gold, as if the sun itself had slowed for their moment. Claire stood barefoot at the edge of the villa's private terrace, a soft sea breeze playing with the veil that trailed from her elegant updo. The lightest silk touched her skin, a custom Dior gown in ivory with delicate floral beading across the bodice, the skirt flowing like ocean mist. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her bouquet, white orchids, blush ponies, and the pale blue gentians Victor had once admired during a walk through Central Park. Behind her, the bridal suite buzzed with the laughter of friends and the gentle chaos of last-minute details. Champagne flutes clinked. Someone was crying. Someone else couldn't find a pin. But Claire. She heard none of it. All she heard was the sound of waves rolling toward the shore. And her heart, steady, full, ready. "Mommy." She turned. There he was. Luke. In his tiny, perfect tuxedo with sand already dusting his bare toes, a white satin pillow cradled carefully in his small arms, 2 rings tied securely with a silken white ribbon. Claire knelt in front of him, tears already stinging her eyes. "Are you ready?" He nodded, grinning. "Daddy said I'm the ring boss." She laughed and kissed his forehead. "You are." The door opened then, and the planner stepped in, smiling with practiced serenity. "They're ready for you, Claire." Her heart gave a single, weightless flutter. "Here we go." The ceremony was set on a private beach, the same cove where Claire and Victor had once walked after midnight, barefoot and spellbound, at the very beginning of their story. Only now, the scene had been transformed. A white silk aisle stretched from the dunes to an altar made of driftwood and soft blooms. Palm trees swayed gently overhead, their leaves catching the sunlight like lanterns. Strings of tiny golden lights were woven through the canopy. Glass lanterns flickered in the sand. Orchids floated in the shallow waters near the shore. Guests, close friends, a few of Claire's family from New York, and Victor's tight-knit circle from Europe and Singapore, sat on cushioned benches, the ocean breeze brushing past them like a whispered blessing. Victor stood beneath the arch, waiting. He wore a custom-tailored cream suit, his shirt collar open, no tie, no pretense. The breeze lifted his dark hair slightly. He had never looked more at ease, or more in love. When Claire stepped onto the sand, escorted by her mother, the crowd hushed. And when Victor saw her, his breath caught audibly. Claire walked slowly, her eyes locked on him, her heart steady in a way she had never known before. Luke trotted down the aisle ahead of her with exaggerated care, balancing the ring pillow like a sacred treasure. His little face lit up the crowd. And then, finally, Claire stood beside Victor. He reached for her hands the moment she arrived, as if anchoring himself to the moment. "You're breathtaking," he whispered. She smiled, voice trembling. "You're not so bad yourself." The ceremony was simple and deeply personal. The officiant, an old friend of Victor's who had known him long before the billions, spoke of choices, of family, of the unexpected gifts that come from heartbreak and healing. Claire and Victor had written their own vows. Victor went first. "I met you when neither of us planned it," he said. "On a yacht I bought to escape the world. And instead, the world found me in you. I lost you once. And when I found you again, you gave me the greatest gift a man can receive, a son, a family, and a second chance. I promise you this, I will never run again. I will never let go of the life we've made. You are my beginning, my home, and my future." Claire wiped her eyes, laughing softly as she spoke. "I didn't expect to fall in love that day. I didn't expect to be rescued. Or to become a mother alone. But even then, even in the hardest moments, I never stopped feeling you with me. Loving you terrified me, but not loving you was impossible. So here I am, scared, flawed, but wide open. And yours. Always." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Luke stepped forward dutifully with the rings, holding the pillow like it was made of glass. Victor knelt and kissed his son's head before taking the ring. Claire did the same. And then, beneath the amber sky and rising tide, they exchanged rings and became husband and wife. As the sun dipped into the sea, the celebration began. Guests danced barefoot in the sand. A live quartet played beneath glowing lanterns strung between palms. Tables were set with sea glass blue linens and crystal stemware, the air fragrant with frangipani and jasmine. Claire and Victor shared their first dance beneath the stars, Luke running in circles around them, giggling. Later, Victor lifted his son onto his shoulders and whispered, "You're the reason all of this happened. You brought your mom and me back together." Luke beamed. "Can we live in the Maldives forever?" Victor laughed. "Maybe not forever. But we'll come back. Every year." Claire looked over and smiled. Their story had begun in water, in a storm, in fear, in survival. And now, it ended, no, blossomed, in the same waves. Not as a rescue, but as a homecoming. A wedding beneath the palms. A family reborn. A love that had been lost and found, and would never be lost again.
Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and wild theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and steamy romance, the next story is always one scandal away.